This week's Haftarah begins with a wake-up call. Hitorari, hitorari, awaken, awaken. Uri, uri, wake up, wake up. Hita'ari mi'afar kumi, shake off the dust and arise. Isaiah is speaking to the defeated and demoralized people, but his answer is not simply consolation. It is transformation. Zion must rise from the dust, throw off the identity of a captive, dress herself in garments of splendor, and rejoice like a bride reunited with her beloved. Centuries later, Shlomo Alvarez took these words and images and wove them into Lecha, Dodi. Every Friday night, Isaiah's prophecy of national redemption becomes a joyous wedding song. We welcome the Shabbat queen dressed in her honor and sing with what one sitter calls Simchat Atzuma Ad Ma'od, exceedingly great joy. But this week, we're going to take the connection one surprisingly step further. Isaiah's call to wake up, change our clothes, and celebrate God's reign does not lead only to Shabbat, it also takes us directly into the high holidays. We usually associate Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur with judgments, trembling, and fear, yet on Rosh Hashanah, Nehemiah tells a weeping people to eat, drink, and rejoice, and the Mishnah declares that there were no days more joyous than Yom Kippur. Welcome to Madlik. My name is Jeffrey Stern, and at Madlik, we light a spark or shed some light on a Jewish text or tradition. Along with Rabbi Adam Mintz, we host Madlik Disruptive Torah on your favorite podcast platform, and now on YouTube and Substack. We also publish a source sheet on Sefaria, and a link is included in the show notes. This week we read Parshat Shoftim, and we read the fourth Haftarah of consolation leading up to the high holidays. So join us for Wake Up and Rejoice as we discover a Jewish wake-up call that invites us not simply to rise up, but to dance. Rabbi, it's going to be Rosh Chodesh Elul by the time this podcast airs, so I guess we're getting into the spirit of the holidays.
That's exciting. There's nothing better than getting into the spirit of the high holidays. So let's take this Haftarah and let's see how it connects to the upcoming high holidays.
And it's also a little bit of new territory for us because normally we focus on the Parsha itself in the 5 books of Moses. And today we're going to look at the Haftarot, which were sections from the prophets that were linked thematically or calendarly with the Parsha. So this week's Haftarah is by Isaiah. It's the 5th book of the prophets, and it's known for its visions of universal peace and renewal. It was written during the period of the First Temple, so this is BC, against the backdrop of rising Assyrian Empire and Israel on the decline. Of course, the temple had been destroyed. Isaiah rebukes Israel for abandoning God and pursuing corruption, calls for change, and warns the nations of their ultimate downfall. But more importantly to us, the third of the book contains comforting prophecies about returning to Jerusalem and redemption, and that's why it's used a lot in these Haftarot of consolation, which starts with Nachamu, Nachamu, which comes from Isaiah itself. So these Haftarot are linked less to the Parsha, but more to the time of year that we're in. Is that correct?
That is absolutely right. Right. So, since the last 10 weeks of the year have Haftarot that are linked to the calendar. The 3 weeks before Tisha B'Av, we have 3 Haftarahs of destruction. And then the 7 weeks after Tisha B'Av, we have 7 Haftarahs of consolation. So even though usually the Haftarahs is linked to the weekly portion, but these last 10 weeks of the year, they're linked to the calendar.
Okay, so it is just poetic and lyrical. We are in Isaiah 51:12, and this is how the Haftarah begins. We're going to see there's a lot of repetition of 2 words. We've already focused on a few in the intro. It says, Anochi, Anochi, hu menachechem. I am the one emphatically who comforts you. What ails you that you fear man who must die? Mortal animals who fare like grass. So just as grass is fleeting, it rises up and it disappears. It already is talking about the mortality, but it's also talking about menachem. It says in the fourth word that he's come to comfort us, to console us, and it has this emphasis of saying, I, this relationship with God. Then we go to Isaiah 51, the same chapter, 16 to 17, and there it says the famous words that I quoted. It says, I have said to Zion, you are my people, rouse yourself. It says, Sion ami ata, hitorari, kumi Yerushalayim. Rouse yourselves, rouse, O Jerusalem, you who from God's hand have drunk God's wrath-filled cup, you who have drained to the dregs the bowl, the cup of reeling. So it's not ignoring the past, it's not ignoring the tough times that preceded, but it is emphatically saying that, number one, God has a relationship with this people, and two, you are my people, and this is a moment to get up and to arise. But hitorari is just beautiful. We'll see, for those of you who don't know it from the Kabbalat Shabbat, how this should resonate with so many of us. Let's just continue a little bit more. Then it goes to Isaiah 52, 1 through 2, and it says, Awake, awake, O Zion, clothe yourself in splendor. In Hebrew, that is Uri livshi uzecha Tzion. And then it goes on with other words that will be familiar to us. Hitna'ari mi'afar kumi. So it says, awake, awake, O Zion, clothe yourself in splendor, put on your robes of majesty, Jerusalem, holy city, for the uncircumcised and the impure shall never enter you again. That this was a moment where they had been conquered. Arise, shake off the dust, sit on your throne, Jerusalem, loose the bonds from your neck, O captive ones, fair Zion. You can almost feel the tremors of emphasis here. It's really coming out you. In Isaiah 52, 7, it says, how welcome on the mountains are the footsteps of the herald, announcing happiness, hearing good fortune, announcing victory. Tell Zion, your God reigns. And so here too, as it finishes, it's talking about come back to the mountaintops of Judah, and your God reigns. You almost feel as if you have to say again, or anew, or he's back, so to speak. And then finally, in 52:11, it says, Suru, again for emphasis, turn away, touch not impure as you depart from there, keep pure as you go forth from there, you who bear the vessels of God. So now he's talking to those who are still in exile in Babylonia, and he's asking them to come back and to leave all of that which is impure behind. And as I mentioned before, we'd be remiss if we didn't have Isaiah's line of Nachamu, Ami Yomer Elokechem, the first of the Haftarot of consolation. There's a lot of emphasis. There's a lot of waking up and shocking the people back to where they are. Just kind of remarkable words on their own, but especially if you know our liturgy.
Yeah, I mean, that's amazing. And obviously, we'll talk about this. The word nachamu, the idea of comforting, is a Torah word. In a number of contexts, the Torah uses the word nachamu. So that's really the powerful word of these 7 haftarot. And actually, the Shabbos after Tisha B'Av has a special name, and it's called Shabbat Nachamu, the Shabbat of consolation, based on the Haftarah. So clearly, that's the word that everything centers around that word.
And it would seem that from that, because I think that's probably the only Haftarah that gets first billing throughout the year, that Shabbat is the beginning of reading these Haftarot of consolation. So I just want to quote a few of the contemporary commentaries who are trying to put these verses that I just read into context. The first is the Eitz Chaim Chumash. That's the Chumash used mostly by the conservative movement. It says, each part of this Haftarah, a divine pronouncement of comfort to Zion and the nation, features a pattern of double proclamation. After God tells the people at the outset that I am he who comforts you, remember we said, I am he who comforts you, Jerusalem, also known as Zion, is exhorted to rouse herself from travail of sorrow and to awake to her new destiny of splendor. Finally, the exiles are called on to turn away from Babylon and begin the journey to the homeland. These repetitions intensify the divine commands and spotlight the Haftarah's three themes of divine presence, national transformation, and return from Zion, or I should say, return from exile to Zion. And then in some of the other commentaries, this one is from the Anchor Yale Bible by Joseph Blenkinsop. He said the repeated verb, or uri hitorari, can signify a call to battle. And he brings a reference to Devorah the judge, a summons to a special mission, such as when God aroused the spirit of Cyrus, or to a prophetic calling. And of course, he's bringing verses for all of these. Or finally, a gathering up of spiritual and physical energies for decisive action. So I think that's kind of echoes what I was saying before, is you can get a sense almost that this is a moment, and he's trying to seize the moment. The repetition itself indicates a sense of urgency and conveys the impression that a critical point has been reached. And he says again, the repetition further along, urging departure, presumably from Babylonia, connects structurally with the first passage, which is Nachamu, Nachamu. Another modern commentary, Alec Moiter, says, awake is an example of reduplication for emotional intensity. In the rich anthropomorphism of the Bible, and he references Exodus, suggests sudden divine recollection after a prolonged lapse of memory. I'm not quite sure who's being woken up here. So here to the human eye, it seems as if the Lord has gone to sleep over his promises. In other words, the anthropomorphism calls on God to act with the same dispatch and urgency that would follow if, in our experience, we woke to the sudden recollection of a forgotten duty. It's just fascinating how rich this repetition is, and of course, especially so because you have it so many times, one after the other.
Right. So let's just say that, you pointed out at the beginning that we're doing something different this week. We're looking at the Haftarah. And the style of the prophets is very much different than the style of the Torah. You don't have this kind of repetition in the Torah. So he's really making a point that the prophet uses repetition. It's kind of poetry, but uses repetition in order to emphasize, to emphasize the point. And of course, the idea of arise, that's good. But it starts with Nachamu, Nachamu. You think about it, the first Haftarah. Why does it have to say Nachamu twice? Just say comfort. Right? Be comforted. Nachamu, Nachamu ami. My people be comforted. But the fact that it says it twice, Nachamu, Nachamu ami, is clearly for emphasis, and it almost sets up the subsequent 6 weeks are going to be repetition. Almost like highlights for us. Look for the repetition, because that's going to be the key of all the Haftarahs. And I think that's the idea of arise. And of course, Rishon Alkabetz in Lecha Dodi, he picks that up also. He understands. That's the call to action. And of course, what better way to begin Shabbat than with that call to action?
And I will say, we do have some repetition. We have tzedek, tzedek, tirdof.
Yeah, that was in this
Justice,
week's Parsha,
justice.
correct.
We also have, and this comes up in the high holidays, Adoshem, Adoshem, Kel Rachum V'chanun. So what really is striking is it's not as if they're creating a new grammar, but the fact that they're using it so much, you really get a sense of intensity. And I think before we start with the Lecha Dodi, in some of the the commentaries or treatments of Jewish liturgy that I've come across, they all point to the Lecha Dodi as almost the peak, as almost the climax of the Friday night service. And there is this sense of great emphasis. Lecha Dodi Likrat Kala Panei Shabbat Nekabla. That just means welcome your bride, to welcome the bride of Shabbat, the face of the Shabbat. We welcome.
Let's just explain for a minute. Shabbat is seen as the bride. Shabbat is seen as a queen. Shabbat is seen as the feminine. So we go out to greet the same way that the groom goes to greet the bride. We go out to greet the Shabbat. And of course, in Tzvat, they used to go out they used to go out on the mountains. They used to go out into the fields, and they used to actually bring in the Shabbat. And that's what the image is.
So I'm going to go to the English, but when appropriate, you or I will throw in the Hebrew so that everybody recognizes it. But clearly, as you were saying, we have Talmudic times where Rabbi Hanina used to robe himself and stood at sunset on the eve of the Sabbath and exclaim, "Come, let us go forth to welcome the Shabbat queen." Rabbi Yanai garbed himself in festive attire on Shabbat and exclaimed, "Come, bride, come, bride." So, and this is in the tractate of Shabbat. So this is not new. What the author of this piyut that was then put to multiple tunes did was he made it into a liturgy and into a song. And what he starts by saying is, Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad, preserve and remember in a single utterance. We will see, depending on how much of the material we get to, that in the Isaiah text that we're reading, it's not quite clear who's speaking when. Sometimes the verbs are in the female singular, sometimes male. What I take preserve and remember in a single utterance based on the Midrash, that Zachor v'Shamor in the two renderings of the Ten Commandments, is there are so many people that could be speaking here. It could be very personal, welcoming the Shabbat. It could be welcoming the Shabbat as a nation, as a world. I think that kind of greets into it. Then it goes Mikdash Melech Ir Melucha. All of a sudden, it goes from something very personal to the sanctuary of the king, royal city, arise. And this clearly comes right out of the verses in Isaiah that we've just been talking about. Too long have you dwelt in the valley of weeping. You are going to will show you, he's going to be good to you. And then in the next stanza, it says, Hitorari me afokumi, take the dust off of yourself. Arise, dress up in your garments of glory. Literally quotes from Isaiah here. And it says, my people, though the sons of Yishai, the Bethlehemite, draw near my soul and redeem it. So it's talking now of the national story. And then it says, Hitorari, Hitorari, wake up, for your light has come. Kumi, get up and shine. I realized reading this that rise and shine, that song that we sing to our kids to wake them up in the morning, probably comes from this in Isaiah. Awaken, awaken, utter a song. The glory of God is revealed upon you. So in a song, the Paitan is saying that we need to break into song. That is how wonderful this moment is. Getting back to this consolation, it says, says, "Feel not ashamed or humiliated. Why are you bowed down? Why do you moan? In you will take refuge the poor of my people. The city will be rebuilt as in ancient times. Lo tikol me, velo tikosha me. They will be ravaged, those who ravaged you. They will be cast off while you devour. You will rejoice over you as a bridegroom rejoices in the bride." And then it goes to the final climax where we all stand up and we turn around as if physically welcoming the Shabbat bride. And this is where I saw in the Sephardic Siddur that I took the Sefaria translation. It says, Boi v'shalom yaomer Adam b'simcha atzuma ad ma'od. That Boi v'shalom has to be said in deep joy, even more. He can't find the adjectives to describe the joy that is, and the uplifting sense of how this is said. And what I'm trying to do in emphasizing this feeling of Lecha Dodi is I'm going to make an argument today, as I said in the intro, that you can easily transfer the same message to the high holidays. And while many people would totally agree with me and understand that the overwhelming emotion on a Friday night when you welcome in the Shabbat is this joy, this uplifting, casting off your garments, the old garments, putting on the new. I am going to make an argument that this Parsha, this Haftarah, and using Isaiah is going in the same direction for the high holidays. I have to work on proving my case, but that's the direction that I'm going, and that's why I really want to focus on Simcha Atzuma ad ma'od. This has to be just unbearable joy. And now, a word from our sponsor. If there's one thing we value at Madlik Podcast, it's reading texts and talking about them. That's why I'm excited to share something I created called Voice Gift Play. It fits in the palm of your hand like a remote control and clips onto any book. It's inspired by those old school museum audio guides, but this is personal. Voice Gift Play stores up to 10 hours of audio across 999 numbered recordings. You simply enter a number to record a comment, memory, or explanation, and enter the same number to play it back. It's perfect for B'nai Mitzvah practicing their laning, capturing Grandpa's favorite tune, or recording Chad Gad Yar in a voice that matters. Go to voice.gift. That's www.voice.gift and use code Madlik for 15% off. Thanks. And now back to our podcast. Let's talk about some of the elements that we find in Lecha Dodi that maybe didn't come up in our specific Haftarah. So in Isaiah 62, it says that you never shall be called forsaken, nor shall your land be called desolate, but you shall be called a delight in her, and your land espoused. In Isaiah 62, it literally uses the language of a deserted woman, of a woman who is cast off. Lo yamar lach, it will no longer be said to you in the feminine, od azuvah, that you are a rejected woman. Lo Old Shemama Kilach Yikra V'chofziba. My desire will be you, Ula Artzel Be'ula, and the land will be your engagement, will be our marriage. And then it goes on to finish, your land shall be espoused, using the language of marriage. As a youth espouses a maiden, your son shall espouse you. So now we're talking about both God and Sion and the homeland. land. And as a bridegroom rejoices over his bride, so will God rejoice over you. So it says, Umasos chatan al kala yasim alecha Elohayach. Again, I was at a wedding last night. They sang Lecha, Dodi. It's all connected, but you can see again how the Paitan took inspiration to merge all of this imagery and this sense of Lecha, Dodi. It's quite wonderful, is it not?
Well, so let me just say that you quoted from the Sephardic Siddur that this needs to be said b'simcha atzuma ad me'od, with total happiness. And of course, that's the image of the bride and the groom. Because when you want to think of what's the ultimate happiness, it's a bride and a groom. So it's all connected. And that's so they take the image of the bride and groom from Isaiah, they apply it to Shabbat, and they take the image of the happiness of the bride and the groom, and they apply that to Shabbat as well.
So I think that is a pretty good anchor for where the Lecha Dodi takes this sense of a bride and groom as a metaphor, motif. The other one that I want to focus on a little bit is this idea of taking off the old clothing and putting on the new clothing. In Isaiah 51, 6 through 8, so that is a few lines before, I believe, our Haftarah actually begins. It says, raise your eyes to the heavens and look upon the earth beneath, though the heavens should melt away like smoke, and the earth wear out like a garment, and its inhabitants die out as well. My victory shall stand forever, my triumph shall remain unbroken. He says, listen to me, for you who care for the right, or people who lay my instructions to heart. Isaiah is talking to the believers, the followers, the people that follow him, and he's talking about taking away the old clothing, which kind of it strikes us of the dead, the worn out, the moth-bound. In 8th, he says, for the moth shall eat them up like a garment, the worm shall eat them up like wool, but my triumph shall endure forever. So again, this sense of taking off the garment and putting on a new garment for Shabbat or for the redemption is very strong. And then the way he ends this whole thing is to say, Sason v'simcha yimtzaba toda v'kol zimra ki nacham Adonai Tzion. He says, God has comforted Zion, gladness and joy shall abide there, the thanksgiving and the sound of music. So you can clearly see how this was an inspiration for the Paitan. And we see, I'm going to quote a little bit from a commentary on Lecha Dodi written by Reuven Hammer, who I believe became the Minister of Education for a while in Israel. And he talks about how even in Lecha Dodi, we go from the individual in the beginning and the end, and then we go to the national. But he says the prophets utilize the language of marriage, love, and faithfulness to describe exclusive relationship God's demands of the people. And it as shown in the Shema, love the Lord your God, v'ahavta et Hashem Elokecha. And he talks about how this merging of the national and the personal became so important. So I want to end by going to Unetaneh Tokef, of all things. Unetaneh Tokef is the famous kind of emotion-laden moment where the Chazan talks about we're all passing in front of God to be judged like sheep. And in it, he talks about we come from dust and return to dust. Remember the dust in the vision of Isaiah that was being thrown off from us. I see that here. We labor by our lives for bread. We are like broken shards, like dry grass. sense, that what in the world is passing passes like grass or a withered flower or beautifully like a passing shadow and a vanishing cloud. He's not saying that to talk to us about the finitude of mortality. I think what he's trying to do is lift us up to cast off that stuff, as Isaiah was saying about cast off the withered grass. That's what will happen to your enemies. But you will have your eternal king. The idea of taking on God and the eternity of our history and of our narrative and of our journey as something that uplifts you and makes you want to shout and dance, I think, is what clearly comes here. And as we know, in Nehemiah, the people are very sad on the beginning of Tishrei, and he tells them not to mourn or weep. He says, go eat choice fruits and drink sweet drinks and send portions to whoever has nothing prepared. For the day is holy to our sovereign. Do not be sad, for your rejoicing in God is the source of your strength. And then all the people went and ate and drank and sent portions and made great merriment. You would never think this is a description of Rosh Hashanah. You'd think it was Purim, for they understood the things that they were told. You know, we quote the Mishnah in Tainit about the 15th of Av to show how the daughters got back. But what the Mishnah really says is there are 2 times of the year that are the happiest. One is the 15th of Av, but Yom Kippur is the other. Again, most people would not associate that. And I think what I'd like to finish on is, how does that resonate with you and your experience with your congregation? Many congregations finish Yom Kippur and they're dancing the horror. And there's this sense, I think, of we survive judgment. But I think this is more than that. This is really about the fact that hitorari, it's God who's asking us to rise up and rejoice. The way I'm going to focus this year is when I say my Rosh Hashanah prayers, I'm going to say, how would it sound if it was Friday night and I was standing welcoming the Shabbat bride? That's my takeaway this
I
year.
think that's fantastic. I add one word, and that is happiness in the sense of confidence. You know, you stand up to judgment. Someone who goes before a judge, you could either be insecure or you could be confident that you're going to win. And we all know that, the judge can read you. And sometimes when he or she sees insecurity, so they play on that insecurity. But if they see confidence, if you're confident, then they believe that you're right. And that's the way I always understood the verses in Nehemiah. Be confident means, you may have sinned where nobody's perfect, but be confident that God is going to be good to us. And if we're confident, then we're happy, because the confidence leads to a confidence that God is going to forgive us. So I agree with you, that idea of Friday night. I'm not sure that on Shabbat it's so much confidence. I think on Shabbat it's more in the sense of bride and groom. I think on Rosh Hashanah, in addition to that, we have a feeling, or we kind of a charge that we should be confident that things are going to work out for us.
I love it. The only tweak that I would make is, I think you want to give confidence, meaning to say that on Friday night, after a tough week of being battered and bruised, you have confidence like a bride does that her husband loves her. And I think that's the idea here, that you get confidence from the very exercise and liturgy and the holiness and happiness of the day. But either way, it's a very refreshing message, which it should be, because it starts with hitorari, wake up and be refreshed.
Fantastic. Okay, great. So the Haftarah plays on the images, is borrowed by Shlomo Alkabetz for Shabbat, and now we take it one step further, that it really is, it's a lead-in to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. I love it.
Amen. Well, we'll see you all next week. Rabbi, have a safe trip
Shalom.
back
I'll
from
see you
Israel.
back in North America. Looking forward.
Okay. Chodesh Tov. Bye-bye. And now, a question for you. What if we modeled the high holiday services on Kabbalat Shabbat? Not only in joy, song, and celebration, but also in length. Something to think about.